Hello, good evening, good afternoon, good morning. It depends where you are. I hope you are doing well here today. And yeah, we'll be today. We are discussing about the topic to bring, and we decided to talk to extend a little bit more about the testing topic since we were talking on the last two sessions ago, and it was very short for a so large topic to be discussed. And yeah, actually, we were talking how many stories we can talk around this topic at least, and how we can actually improve our quality on the delivery process. So to help me with that, I want to call my friend Pedro Caballero. Hey, Pedro, how are you?
Hey, hello Hugo, how are you? Nice to be here. Well, yeah, testing is a nice topic. Actually, I will be talking about this topic tomorrow. Oh no, after tomorrow, right? In TDC, I'll be placing a talk there about testing. Of course, TDC has lots of very nice topics, but well, I like this topic just not only because uh, it is interesting, but because it helps our lives, right? When we that work with code every day, we feel that when we don't have tests, we suffer. So yeah, let's talk about
Yeah,
it.
I think not just ourselves. I'm sure that our audience also have good stories. And if you are, or do you have some questions or some good story to share, please type here on the chat. We can start talking about that as well. And I also want to call my good friend here, our Java champion and AI specialist. Hey, Mani, how are you?
Hey, good. I'm fine. Thank you. How are you? Pedro, how are you? Hugo, thanks for having me over. I hope you can hear me well.
We are
Yeah, I
hearing you
can.
well.
Perfect. Good. Sorry, there was a little bit of a delay in my signing up, but here we are finally. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the last session we had about testing and carrying it forward from there, and that'll be awesome. I think we've got a whole list of things we want to cover, so let's see how far we get with it.
Yep. So yeah, and last time we talked about testing, I think Bruno gave us a very interesting point of view about how we have to change our mind actually about testing, especially when we are talking about oh, I will take more time to implement something and deliver something with testing. And if we keep with that in mind, it will be very difficult to actually make it possible in your project and actually have the benefits in a more long term, not so long term, right? But I think Pedro, I actually have some good story that can actually bring this in a very recent, right, Pedro? Can you share a little bit about that? It was so fun that it's so recent and so connected with the topic today.
Yeah, I was talking about that last week. Uh, last week it was on Thursday, uh, and we were releasing our feature, right? And the feature has some kind of integration with a third party, of course. And then but it when we release and I try to make it work, we realize, oh, it's not working. And then we take a look on the code and look at the monitoring. Monitor is a very good topic. We are looking at the monitoring things, and I see, man, what's happening here? It's not correct. It should be working, right? And I realized, look at the code and the logs and say, okay, there is some problem in validation. I take a look on that. And I took a look on that and realized, oh, that code has like more than 3 months old. And I say, oh man. I say, yeah, but well, 3 month old code should be right, okay? I never had problem with that. All right, okay. Took a look. Man, it took like 1 hour looking at that code, and I realized, okay, there is a variable, a strange variable here. The variable was named like user date, but actually it was not user date. When you look at the code, it was not user date, it was user data. And when that click came to me and I saw, oh my god, there are lots of places that it was not user date that we need to use, it was user data and vice versa. And I looked at it and said, man, wow, this is actually when you look at it and you realize that, you say, oh man, that is completely wrong. And it's oh, it should never work. And I think, oh man, it's been 3 months. It was running before. Why? But it's not working. What happened? And then we realized that, oh god, that code never worked, and that code was never tested. I say, oh god, it was never. Oh man, do we have a unit test here? No. Do we have any integration test that should test it here? Well, we had many new integration tests that should test that code, but that code was an integration with a third party. And that third party, there is some variable that says, okay, if you are running in stage environment, we should not call that third party because we don't have a test environment for that third party. So in our staging area, that code was being skipped. And in our integration tests area, that code was being skipped. And I said, man, that code never worked. And I just saw the first time the error after our production release. And it was a data thing. Man.
What a typo, right?
A typo, right? Something that you look saying, oh my god, one unit test would have take that error really soon. Because it was something that makes all the business validation wrong, you know? So, oh my god. And I would say, I said to my friend, I say, man, and this never worked. And I say, oh my god, it looks like me. I always got confused with the words date and data. Oh my god.
I understand this confusion because in Portuguese, yeah, especially in Portuguese, we have the word data that is dates. But I totally understand him. But yeah, just want to say a quick hello here to Tomoe. Hey Tomoe, thanks for writing here. If you can, for anyone that is watching this session, what is if you can share to us where are you from and what is your biggest challenge with testing? Hey, welcome. I see your message here, so welcome here. Please share to us what is the biggest challenge that you have about testing, about adding tests or creating tests in your projects. I have a lot of stories also here, and yeah, that's something interesting. I see a lot of these days. I see how this movement of implementing tests first, like the test-driven development, are much more popular. But I'm from old school where I have to fight to actually bring this on the project, and yeah, I still have a lot of project that has to implement this culture inside the team, and still a very common discussion, right? So actually, I had a story. Not so similar to Pedro, but when we are trying to implement tests on the project, a friend of mine are bringing the new testing implementation, and she was very happy and excited to bring it in. But the whole team was she was trying to evangelize the whole team, and people there are they agree with the benefits, but on the day to day, they are very familiar with the current process of developing and not prioritizing tests. And yeah, the challenge is not actually implementing tests; it's to change the culture, right? To change the whole process. And there was a much bigger challenge because the whole process doesn't actually give make it easy. They have to implement the tests, or they have to implement the code, and they have to deliver the code to another more senior people to review it. And if it's okay, they will pass. If not, they will bring back. And they don't participate on this reviewing process. So it was much more challenging pipeline of delivery to drive. So yeah, that's something that happens and still very common these days. And I think it's a current challenge actually. And I don't know, how about you, Moni? Do you have some experience with your team, with working with the team and creating tests for the project?
All the time since I've started working in this field, at least since I've been aware that there's something called tests, because previously people would just not even give focus onto tests. But yeah, it's an ongoing thing. So there are lots of things that are actually leading to this, right? For example, many sessions ago, or at least a few sessions ago, I mentioned this Joule's list of tests. Joule, what is it? Joule on software, if you've heard of that. He has a list of 10 items that you need to fulfill. I have actually. So what I will do is I will share it later on. But there is this person called Joule. He has written a lot of blog posts on this in this whole space, not just testing, but about software. But he came up with these 10 rules that any organization or any team must fulfill in order for them to be complete, and in order to them to be following the rules and delivering quality software. And one of those 10 rules is to have a CI/CD system, a CI system, right? And then testing and all that stuff. But then when that comes in, you also have, if you have CI running all the time and then you have your tests running all the time, then whenever something's introduced, like how Pedro was talking about a feature, by whether you call it data or whatever, if it's introduced, if there are no tests, then the test coverage should kick in, right? Because that should also be part of the CI. So the test coverage will say you've just introduced code, but you have not introduced test on it. And if you introduce test for that code, it will be reviewed, right? And then if that test doesn't make sense, then the human will catch it. So there should be double and triple gateways or quality gates that where code should be stopped. And if all of that still passes through, and if something still gets introduced, then the other gate, which is the CI gate, that should catch the code, right? And it should fail the build system. So somewhere the other line in the pipeline, it should get caught. So that, to set up that kind of a system and to follow those rules that Joule on software says, isn't really done in practice, or hasn't been in the past, but of course it's changing now. But even now, people sometimes have a CI system, but it doesn't run overnight tests. It doesn't do, it only does an on-demand test. That means if you push a commit, it runs tests. But like an overnight test is necessary, because there are so many moving parts to your software, isn't it? It's not just the tests that you've written and the code that you've written, right? So that's something people are not doing. Then making sure that there's full business coverage on your test, not just 100. It's not the 100% test coverage one should seek for. It's 100% business requirements coverage, and all the tests that you need to write for that should be close to the amount of code or more than the code you've written. That means, again, you don't write more code than it's necessary, right? So when you keep a balance of that, it'll always be the test coverage and the business coverage will always be 100% or near 100%, right? And then the tolerance should be very low of failure. Some people say 80%, but I think the 20% gap can be harmful. So anywhere from 1 to 5% tolerance, and in some cases people don't have a tolerance. You need to have 100% coverage. That means every bit of code you've written, you need to have a justifying test for that, right? Or the code should justify that it needs to be there. And if it needs to be there, then it should justify what business requirement it's trying to fulfill, right? So they all go hand in hand. And then all of that should be tested on demand and per commit, or not per commit, but per request, and also an overnight test. And in the overnight test, you're doing a lot more intensive tests, right? You're not just doing your business requirements test. You're doing the non-performance, the non-functional tests. Yeah. So those are the performance tests, the all the other tests, quality of the pact. You name the tests that don't have to do the infrastructure test, your integration tests, right? So your business requirements, all of that is complete and covered. But when your system runs in an infrastructure environment or in an environment, how would it behave? And what are its requirements? Is it fulfilling those requirements? Those are different. The business doesn't care about that. The business wants you to have a working software that fulfills the business requirement and is available in production. So between that to production, there are all those other tests that you need to do: security tests, performance tests. So those all come under the non-functional tests, because they're not part of the functionality, but they are part of your infrastructure functionality, right? So those extensive tests you run overnight, and you do it every night, right? And in some organizations, they might even do it twice a day, right? The first set finishes, the second set starts, because you have another infrastructure that's constantly doing the tests. So when you have something like that, always checking, then even if a human being misses something will catch it, right? In a very rare case, it'll be missed out. So my point of saying all of this is, there are very few organizations and very few teams that want to go to this extent. It's always a fight, as Hugo was mentioning, to get to want them to do that. They don't see the value of it. They feel, oh, why are we spending so much time on it? You're spending so much time on it, so in future you don't have to spend 10 times that time to debug and to fix and to rewrite stuff that could have been written better in the first or second instance, right? And things like that. So yeah, that's my story about an answer to your question, Hugo. But I hope that kind of answers what you're trying to ask me. But that's why, in a very short summary, has been more or less an experience in different projects and different situations. Yeah. In some places where I had the ability, I would introduce all of this. I would set up like a project I did almost 3 years ago, during this time, actually, just before the pandemic kicked in. I was introduced to a system where they didn't have a nightly build. They have a CI system that would only run when you push the code. They didn't have full test coverage. They thought they did TDD, and they wrote the test. The tests are not readable at all. I had to rewrite the tests and delete all their tests. In fact, their senior stakeholder tells me that, actually, can you rewrite the test and delete all our tests and rewrite it in the way you've written it, so that our tests have the language you've written it in? I mean, we're still using the same language, but like at least the tests are readable. So, and they didn't have a nightly build. When I introduced the nightly build, they realized that when one of the dependency version changed, their package broke, right? Because the nightly build picked it up. And had that not been in place, they would only discover it when their client was trying to install that package, the package of theirs, right? It's a little bit too late in the process if the client is installing your package and figures out your package is not compatible with the dependency package, right? So things like that. And there was test coverage was not, whatever test coverage they had wasn't one-on-one with a lot of the functionalities. There was bugs in the system that the test didn't pick up. And so there was a whole lot of fixing of all of that. And they did not know how to also, if they introduced a new feature, they did not know how to incrementally test all the different things, including in the test, they need to use data that they already use in their system, but of course, obfuscated. But anyways, because it was a private repository, they could still use their own data. They didn't do that. In their test, they were just doing regenerating some mock data. If you use ABC 1, 2, 3 all the time, it doesn't cover your business domain. The business domain has some data, right? Like real names, real addresses, real values, real numbers, real amounts. And they need to have all of that, isn't it?
That was what you rewrite in the code, right? You changed that test that makes no sense to test that makes business sense. That's what you do.
Exactly. But also the tests were written in they were so obscure. The whole setup was so obscure. They were doing loops, and in the loops they were doing asserts. That's not how
Yeah.
you do the assert.
Oh
You
my
assert
God.
the whole object. You
But
don't loop to.
that's very interesting an effect that I see occurring also on some projects, that when people think about writing tests, they want to be productive in writing tests, so they try to do some way to like put in a for loop and try to, okay, I will test all cases inside one unit test, and then
That's
and
many
then
things.
the test itself become more complex than the business the
Yeah.
itself. And it was
Because they thought they did TDD and they didn't. Because the way they tested, or they should have been testing it, it should be a unit at a time, and then the bigger unit, and then the bigger unit, and then the bigger unit, like, in layers. So, but because you have to build it that way, right? If you build it like first, and then you retrofit your test, and you think you did TDD, then your tests are going to be like that. It's going to reflect how you've built it. I didn't tell them that, but I didn't tell them, no, you guys didn't do TDD, but I made them realize by showing an example, and they could see it from every commit, because I asked them to actually study my commits on how I incrementally did every commit. And I showed them, if you just take this branch and you study all the commits, if you do your next feature using the same method, you should have full test coverage, and you should also have the methodology down. Right? And so I actually introduced a whole new feature into their package, first by making their package fully test covered, put it into a CI/CD system, and I have all kinds of tests in there: slow tests, fast tests, acceptance tests. So the non-functional tests were also part of the package. Package wasn't very big, so you could do all of this in there. And then the performance test, the very heavy-duty big data performance test. So there were two types: performance tests and slow tests. So the performance tests were just checking the performance of the whole, but the slow tests were running on huge amounts of data, and also on aspects of the system that would always run slow. So it was a combination of performance tests and large amounts of data. So, and they saw that there's a need for all of that, and that all of those should run in the nightly build. So when you did a commit or a pull request or a merge to master, it would run only the quick tests, the acceptance tests, and most of the tests, but not the non-functional tests. The non-functional tests would only run overnight, including all the tests would run overnight, right? The quick, slow, the whole suite, plus the slow tests and the performance tests, all of that would run overnight, because now you have 12 hours, in hand, right? All of that would take an hour or two to run, which is fine. The other tests would take 15 minutes to run or less. I can't remember. So that's how it should be, isn't it? And so then they learn, and then introducing badges into the build system, so they can see that this 100% test covered and the build passed, right? So when they look at the README page, right, that's something, and then they would have it for every branch. So things like that, because the CI systems these days give you those abilities, right? It reflects to you how much percentage coverage you have, and how many times and which builds pass, whether the last build that ran passed or not. So with that, you can see the health of your system. These are the things that would, in addition to doing your tests, would reflect what your tests have done. So which I have, this is my experience. I had to build this up. Now, the good thing is it gives me work to do and build these things up. If the client was all perfect, I wouldn't have to do any of these things, right?
For sure.
But because the client wasn't, I got the opportunity to fill the gaps.
For sure. How long this took? Because it looks like some
They had a
big,
budget
big
for
work.
30 days, but I could stretch the budget into 3 months, because I only did a few days of work every week, and I stretched that budget for 3 months. But they wanted it to be done in 30 days, but I said I don't do it that way, because I had other projects going on as well. So I could only do like a couple of days, 2.5 days, 3 days, sometimes a week. And they were happy with it, because they were getting results from what they were, and they were so busy with other projects that they didn't have the chance to catch up with my project, that even if I didn't produce work for 10 days, they wouldn't be worried about it. But I was always producing work every week. But there was a 30 days project, but actually I finished, there was in 3 stages. I finished the first stage in less than 5 days. The second stage I took 2 weeks to finish, and then the remaining time they told me, please clean up our code base, use up all the remaining time. So there was a lot of time left. Almost 30% of the time was left because we didn't need the 30 days to do the project, But they said, remaining time, can you please use to refactor our code base, clean it up, rewrite all our tests, do all the documentation. So I left the whole thing in a place. And plus, I researched a feature for them, and I introduced that feature into their system in the exact way their whole system works, right? Because the feature was foreign, was like it was like a paper that I had to read, and I had to convert all the functionalities of the paper into their package features, right? So then they could see what kind of a data do you input when you have a new feature like that, which functions do you write, when do you write the test, when do you do the implementation, and also include in it the performance tests that I had already written for their package previously, right? So, and this is all show by example, because they can see every commit and every pull request, because GitHub, it was Bitbucket actually, sends out notifications, right, every time you do a pull request, and you can see in the pull request or in the branch all the commits. So you can see what the changes are. So everybody who's on that repository can see what changes are going on and how to write code and how to write the test. So if something was failing or passing on CI/CD, they could see.
Yeah,
and they get nightly reports of the builds as well. The performance tests ran, and all the logs are there. And my logs are very verbose, so you could see which test, how much time it took for which test it failed, and for what reason it failed, and what was the data. All of this was missing in their package. Their tests would fail. You would not know why it failed. They did not have, you have assert reasons, failure reasons that you could put on every assert. They never used any of those things. I had to embed that into. We have a lot of questions.
We got some questions here from Tomoe. Mocking data is very annoying. And
tell me about it.
And Tomoe wrote here about I personally against tests. I would like if this is the place to raise controversy. Of course, you're very welcome to raise your point of view here, Tomoe. And yeah, I believe the largest incentive on the part of developer to do this. Actually, it doesn't. I can't put the whole message here on the view, but she said that to do this through testing is just not being fired, because you get more work. In reality, you can do just fine with very descriptive logs and CloudWatch. Great points. I think there was there was very valid points here. Pedro, do you want to start with that? What do you think about?
Yeah, well, I think we have two different problems here, right? First one, mocking data is very annoying. Mocking data is very annoying, and we could discuss this for many times, right? We have discussed about it, right, Hugo, last week.
Yeah.
And what was the main issue there? When you are writing code and you have lots of mocking to write that code, this is a bad smell. That's what we were discussing. And say, whoa, let me rephrase that. Well, why you need to mock data when you are writing tests? Well, you need to mock data because you have some dependency that's not exactly the part of the code you want to stress out, you want to test, right? And you need to that part of the code, that dependency of your code, to be more to be on your control, I can say. So you can put that other dependency responding the way you want, right? That's why you mock code. If you have lots of mocks, it shows that your code has lots of dependencies. If you have lots of dependencies, your code is highly coupled, right? And we know we have that two things we need to have in our codes, right? Less coupled, and highly what's the name in English? Cohesive, right? The highly cohesion and less couplement. That's what you need to have in our code. If you have many mocks, you have highly coupled. So when you look at that, you say, "Oh my God, my code needs some refactoring. I need to make my code less coupled, right?" So when you have lots of mocking data, that's what the point. And I see when it happens. When it happens, when you have lots of mocking, it's when you are not writing codes, when you are writing a feature, right? When you are writing, you're just writing your feature, writing, no testing at all. You write lots of things, and in the end, you go to your test and say, "Oh, I have to mock many things." That's why people say, "Oh, TDD is important." For me, what I need. I sent to you, Hugo, a tweet. Adam Bien just sent out here in Twitter. It was today, I think.
I think I saw that tweet. I have seen that tweet.
Yeah, and he asking, "Why you write tests?" Right? I'm writing tests too, and 49% of the people said writing better code, or get 80% coverage, move faster. I'm not writing tests. 15% say I'm not writing tests, right? And that's the point, right? You write tests to get your code better, and not only business, because business is the main functionality your code must have, right? But there are lots of other kind of tests, and the tests show you the quality of your code as well. So the first paragraph is really interesting. I will just start with it if you want to say something, Manny, about mocking as well.
Yeah. So one thing I wanted to add. I don't know why Adam Bean didn't put in his tweet, and I will say that one of the options should have been, and there are many answers to it, is to ring fence. You write tests to ring fence your business requirement, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you know what ring fence means, right? Meaning set it in stone. That's what you're doing.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. Ring fence also means to protect your business requirement, so that the implementation that you've written that fulfills your business requirement is protected by the test.
Mm-hmm.
So if at all somebody or some reason the business requirement fails, it's the test that is protecting the business requirement will tell you that the business requirement is no longer valid because of it's not fulfilling this requirement that I'm checking for, right? So that is one of the reasons for writing tests. Better code, yes, better code is a side effect of writing tests, right? Also, not necessarily true. You could write the most pathetic code, right? But if you have the right tests, the tests are not checking if the code is correct or not, or the code is written in high quality or not. The tests are checking whether the code is doing the right thing or not. Right? Of course, you could be doing a lot of wrong things in it, like a lot of system outs and a lot of side effects that you're not checking for.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're checking for the business requirements and it's fulfilling that business requirement, whatever actions you're doing in between, before or after, and it's not been checked for, the test doesn't know. Right? So that's what the test is doing. The test is actually checking and ring fencing your business requirement. Right? So like when I was learning, there was a time when I took a bit of a sabbatical and I went backwards and I said I want to start from basics. One of the things I learned is that if you write acceptance tests or you write tests, it doesn't really matter what you write in your implementation. Of course, that's not necessarily how you should do it, because even if your implementation changes and the tests are passing, that means it's still doing the right thing, right? Provided your tests are sane and it has passed through the sanity check. It's not like how you're doing a reckless job where you're just letting the test check anything and you go and change your implementation code and the test never finds anything. No, that's not what I'm saying. So that's why you should be able to change your implementation anytime. Because what if, I was giving this example some time back to somebody, I don't know, at this session. What if the hundreds of lines of code you've written can be replaced with one line of a library function, and you do that and you delete your hundreds of lines of code? Your test should not break, right? And if your test doesn't break, is that a problem? if you can replace the hundreds of lines of code with that one line of library call. No, it's a great thing. Now you've moved all the responsibilities to the other package. Of course, there are again discussions on that decision as well, right? But that's a different conversation. Right? But the point is that the test, the implementation is abstracting layers and layers of business logic. And however you do that business logic is not the concern of the test. The test is only checking, are you doing the right thing? Right? So that was an option I think it must have been missing in that tweet. But anyways, let's go on to the next question, because this was on the mocking data. I don't want to add any more because then we won't have time to talk about the next points. But there's a lot more things to talk about if you guys both agree with me on this one.
Yeah, the other question was this one. That Tomoe is personally against tests because in reality you can do just fine if you just with just very descriptive logs and CloudWatch. This phrase is interesting.
Good. You want to start with it, Pedro? Because I have a perfect answer for that one.
Really? Oh, please. I'd like the perfect answer.
I don't know if it's a perfect answer. See, here's what I say. There's no right or wrong, right? It's all relative. If you can replace your test with something that does exactly and gives the exact or even more or better value than what tests give, and you're able to automate it, you're productive, you're pragmatic, and you're delivering value, your team is moving faster, then please introduce that and then tell all those people who wrote all the test-related design patterns or methods or processes or best practices, tell them about that thing you just discovered, provided it should do the same value or more what tests do, right? So go ahead. You have the freedom to go and do what you want to do. CloudWatch or Sea-Watch or Baywatch, doesn't matter, right? Go and do it. Or descriptive logs. Yeah, using Splunk and all that stuff. And these days you have the Elk stack, which will read the logs and give you nice Grafana graphs and all that, and alerts and all that. So please go and do it. But then make sure that your team is running faster. Every time you introduce a new process or a feature, nothing's breaking. You're able to measure code coverage. You're able to measure business requirements coverage. So we have nothing against these two statements. We're not going to fight you at all. You have the freedom now, and maybe you have put a rope around your neck by putting these statements here, because if you are not able to deliver it, then you might have to go back to tests. Yeah. But if you can organize and architect this descriptive logs and CloudWatch and many other tooling or any other tooling in such a way that it delivers the same value as tests or better value than tests, no problem, right? I think both of you will agree with me, and everybody else will agree with that, right? So that's what I've learned, and we've all actually learned, is that you can replace one thing with the other, but the thing that you're replacing it with should then now deliver the exact same value or better value, not deteriorate in value. And if it deteriorates in value, there's a limit of deterioration of value, right? You cannot have all the good things you get out of the previous thing that you had suddenly gone. You cannot do without it, right?
Yeah.
It's the same for us, right? For example, we moved from Restream to Wave, right?
Yeah.
Is it a better choice or a less better off choice? Are we getting the same value or less value? We know this from our last two broadcasts, that there are some pros and cons, but it's not multiple steps backwards, right?
Right.
It's maybe we're losing one or two small things, but 95% of the things we want, but we cannot have that with tests. The things that tests do, we cannot have that. We cannot go backwards. If it's in some organizations, you cannot go backwards 5%. That's a big number in some organizations, right? Like in organizations where you have to be, like finance, for example, I'll say, and many other organizations, space, finance, space, you name it, aeronautics industry. Everything is critical. 1% is critical. So you cannot replace tests from their system and say, I'm going to put it on cloud, or I'm going to put ABC and PQR, and that's going to do the job of tests, because I'm against tests, or I don't think tests are valuable.
Exactly.
And an organization may have 10, 20, 30, 40,000 tests.
Yeah.
I think Tomo agreed with your answer, Vani, but well said here. One thing that is very important always is if it's delivering value or not, right? So even for tests, that is moments that it makes sense that make move your team to create those tests or not. So all I think as it is in when we do trade-offs in architecture, I think for these decisions are big decisions that if that delivers value, that probably should be done. So I think Pedro, do you want to add something? I see you raising your hand. Yep.
Yeah. I think this is a really interesting discussion because, well, in my current job, for example, sometimes we do that, right? We have good monitoring, right? We are using Datadog here. We have descriptive logs. We have many kinds of alarms coming from it. We have lots of analysis coming from it. We have lots of dashboards coming from it, right? And so in this case, we can have we could see many of the aspects, many aspects of the system, just by doing by getting from the monitoring, right? But for example, that case that I told in the beginning, I had all these things, right? I have unit tests, I have integration tests, I have acceptance tests, end-to-end tests. I have good monitoring, right? And even though I had lots of troubles to get the delivery of this feature because of one bug that was there in the monitoring, you know. So I can't say that using that way of without tests in this case would bring me the same value, you know, as Manny said. So in that case, particularly, I'm talking about me, okay, Tomoya, as we are saying, Manny, as it was Manny saying that we don't need to, if we can keep up with the value, is okay, right? In that case, I couldn't, and I was me, and the owner of the company looking trying to get that thing work, you know, and in the after hours, it's not bringing value, right? So in my what I what I would love to have, it was not me that introduced that bug, someone else, and we have lots of people writing code, right? I cannot say that I will know all the parts of the code as well. At that moment, I was the engineer that was available at that time, you know. It would be anyone else, right? So that's that in this case, I think we should have a better test coverage because we were not testing that business. That is especially important business requirement we had there. That was the validation of the user can do this thing or not. Man, this is something that people from product to write in the paper. Oh, the user must be able to do that, and it was not tested, right? And I could see that in the monitoring. I could see any dashboard saying that it was a 3 months code, right? So that's this point. This kind of things is difficult to say. Oh, it's bringing more value because, well, how much it cost to not have that small test now at that moment, right? I had another problem some time ago with it isn't this story I will talk in my talk in TDC. I had a similar problem. We had a external API integration. We have, right? and everything was okay. We have tests, we have mocking, we have contract, right? And then suddenly, in a weekend, it starts failing. But it was not failing completely failing, like, oh, it's been not getting 500 errors. No, it was just in cases that it should not validate, it was validating the users, right? And I say, oh my god, what was wrong in that case? It was just the external API changed a little the contract, and the system was understanding that, but misunderstanding, understanding that incorrectly. It was not an error, because it was an error, it would be great, but it was not. It was understanding incorrectly. Well, so what should I do then in that case? There is no in that case it's difficult to say, oh, I need to have, in this case, a good monitoring would be better, right? A good monitoring would be better. And then when I discover that problem with good monitoring, I need to enhance my tests to not having that again, right? So I think both things need to work.
Yeah, I think I was going to get to that as well. That you need to have the best of both worlds.
Exactly.
I think we have this tendency of saying, "Oh, we'll only put all our eggs in this basket. We won't do that. We won't put much attention there." But then what happens is that you don't take advantage of the other thing that gives you insights that this thing cannot give you insights. Like all this unit tests, integration tests, acceptance tests, they have their limits. They don't run on production all the time. On production, you have monitoring and observability tools, logs, and those are your eyes and ears of your system. And there you set conditions and alerts so that if certain things happen, which is outside the scope of your functionality, because these are non-functional tests or non-functional checks that you do on your system, which your tests cannot. Your tests, of course, you can learn from the observations, what you were just mentioned earlier. You can learn from your observations of your current behavior of your system, and then decide maybe I should put some more tests here so that what it's doing now here it shouldn't be doing, because I think I'm observing it's probably not failing now, but with a certain other combination it'll fail. Why don't I go and check my code so it doesn't even do that, and change my implementation as well so it doesn't do this, so that I don't have this future thing. So one helps the other, but you got to have the best. You got to have both the checks. You got to have the pre-production checks, which is all the tests we're talking about, the test pyramid, and then you have the post-production checks, which is the monitoring and observability. And the combination of the two is more complete than just having one or putting all the weight on one and not having the other.
Exactly.
Very cool. I think I was let with Phil to add here. I don't know if I have much to add here. Just want to say Ohio to channel Finro D and say hello to Mario Torres. So if you also have any, what is any biggest challenge for testing in your project and want to share here, feel free to do so. We are here answering and interacting with Tomoe point of view here about testing, right? I hope, Tomoe, that these answers could help you think about how you can actually help in your project, or also bring a new idea. I think that would be very interesting if you have success with that. One thing that comes in my mind that will be challenging is to actually bring some new practice, and since as the same as the team that I was talking before, it's always a challenge. So the challenge not become just implementing some practice, is to make it accepted by the team and actually bring consistency with that practice for your team. So that would be always a big challenge for anything new that you will bring to your team. So, Pedro, how about talk a little bit about creating mocking external services testing for, or what do you think?
Well, I think
You're
that I
like,
think we are
feel
good
fun.
for today, right?
Yeah.
We are almost in
In the,
in the
yeah,
end of our
yeah.
session, right? Maybe we can talk about our books and
Okay, you're
go
right.
to the
Yeah, you're right.
conclusion.
I was worried because I think the time here and we are really close to the end also. So
But
yeah,
I love it. I love the discussion. I love
discussion.
the comment of Tomoe, and I would like just to add something in Tomoe comment that is say testing is just not being fired. I think this is interesting to comment. At least I'd like to add some one thing. When we have a problem when everything works, we are okay, right? But when it's not, right? For example, when we have a bug that makes the company lose lots of money, right? Because that's the point, right? About money. Then it became a problem. And you say, "Oh, I'm write test just to not being fired," and then I write tests. If something wrong, oh, I have written tests, so it's not my problem. You know, it's when we have do we have some kinds of contracts? We have some kinds of difficulties that make the test not only something to make sure our code works, but to make sure we have done everything to make sure our code works, right? So it's not exactly just not being fired, but exactly to make sure to put the value of making sure. And this value is that exactly you'll say, oh, if you have a bug, well, you're gonna lose lots of money. We have a really famous example in NASA about the rockets. I think everybody knows about this example. I just summarize here. They are trying a rocket, and the rocket must go in a specific direction. When they launch it, it was okay, and then it starts to go into a totally different place, and then they had to explode that. And they discovered what happened. One component was in miles, and other component was in kilometers. And they are sending info to each other. One in kilometers, other miles. Only that. How many millions of dollars we lost? the U.S. taxpayer lost at that moment in that day. Yeah, you know. So
I have shared an article here related to
yeah, this one.
it's not the exact one probably you're talking about. Maybe it is the one, but it says
Ariane 5.
$370 million lost, but it is because of that specific situation. I'm not talking about. I don't think it's talking about the one you're talking about. But yes, I've heard of the one you're talking about as well. But the point is the same, right?
Yeah,
The
the point
point
is the
is the
same.
same.
It's
Yeah.
the same. They didn't make sure. They didn't do everything to make sure all the systems are working together, right?
Yeah.
So
So
and
actually,
then
to add,
someone got fired. I don't know.
yeah. Well, I don't know if someone got fired, but in a high caliber project like that, failures of a project is not subjected to teams. They go back and see how they can do it better, right? Because you're talking about very smart people from planet Earth, right? These
Of
are
course.
not just a team they put together, and if it didn't perform, they'll disband the team and they'll fire the people, right? Because if they fire those people, where are they going to get a replacement for them? They are like the creme de la creme of this. It's really hard to find the people and put a team together like that. Just like the people who are behind the Hadron Collider. It's a $10 billion project, right? All the scientists and PhDs who have been working, there's hundreds of them, right? To put a team together like that to build the Hadron Collider that's in CERN, it's not a joke. And you cannot be I don't know how they share the news that you guys didn't do this well, but how they put it, but they must have ways to let them know that yes, it has been a failure. Let's go and look at what we did wrong, because these are scientists who do experiments, right? Experiments can go wrong, right? So then we can see which variables and they can see which variables they didn't pay attention to, which variables were moving parts, and which variables they had under control. Again, I'm not well versed with any of that, so I don't know how they went about dissecting the problem. But that's see what coming back to what you're saying about tests is, so tests are in today's world, tests have two or three, more than two values maybe. One of them is to verify and validate that what you've been asked to do, you have done it, right? So you validate to yourself, but also because it's written in code, it's concrete, right? So anybody else can read it and verify and validate, yes, actually what they asked us to do is also done. Not just that, now the second value is you put it on an automatic system, it'll constantly keep checking, right? If you didn't have tests and you just had those two people who could read the code and say, yeah, the code is doing exactly what you had asked us to do. What if those two people no longer can read the code, or they don't work in the organization, or they're not part of that department? How are you going to validate that the code now actually does what it does? Because even if one line of code changes, but what if the code doesn't change? Is the data that's going to the code is changed, right? So looking at the code doesn't help, right? You couldn't say, yeah, the code does what it's supposed to do, because you can't iterate through all the data that it can possibly munch. But now the test can actually, the moment the data changes or anything else other than the code and the data changes, the test will trigger and say it's not doing what the business is expecting it to do. This you cannot have possible if you don't have a piece of code called test checking against the business code. That's the value of a test. Two values, right? It ring fences, that's what I was saying right in the beginning. It ring fences your business requirement, but also it ring fences by constantly checking against your business requirement. It's a quality gate.
Perfect.
Well, so I think we are out of time now. I think it's a time to actually share our books of the session. So who wants to start today?
Your name's on top there, right, Hugo?
Okay.
Oh no, it's mine. All right. So I'm going to share the most talked about book in the world of testing, and he's a very popular gentleman, Ken Beck. And so I'm going to share his book, TDD by Example by Ken Beck. This was my first testing book I ever read, and it is super complete from the sense of how to write tests, how to write test-driven code. And that book has got great examples and exercises, and it walks you through in a very incremental process from simple TDD to the red green refactor steps, all the way to more complicated ones. So I highly recommend having a copy of this book. I have a copy of the book somewhere in the shelf there. I've been through it, and I would say going through it multiple times really strengthens your test writing skills. And hopefully test reading skills as well. But this is just a starting point. So yeah, with that, I'll pass it on to the two of you. I'm sure you both have some books. Oh, yeah. Martin Fowler, integration tests. Great. One better than the other.
Yeah. No, sorry.
Go ahead, Pedro.
Go on. Yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah, mine is not a book, but it's a post on Matt Fowler's blogs, Matt Fowler's blog. Yeah, Martin Fowler's blog is something really, really incredible, right? There is lots of fantastic piece of information there. I can say to everybody, man, If you need something, go there, find the topic, take a read, and then you can take a look in everywhere. Because Martin Fowler is a fantastic guy in our field. And this in integration test 1 is really insightful because there is a discussion about how to write the integration tests in a good way when we have different services and I have external APIs. That blog post is really insightful on that. I suggest everyone to read it if you are working with external APIs, that I think you are, because everyone is working with external APIs, right? So that's my suggestion.
Great. Before sharing my book, I want to add to share here that Tomoe, that is a good point. Tests help newcomers. Say a quick hello to Max. Hey, Max. I hope you're doing well.
Hello, Max.
Hello, Max. Great.
And yeah, Tomoe also add here, it was really insightful talk and give us suggestion about topics for the next session. We do appreciate a lot, Tomoe, to give such suggestions. I think that are great topics to talk about, and hope to see you there as well, and to bring more questions or bring some discussions here. It was a great experience here to have your participation here, and I incentivize everyone watching us to do the same. Bring your questions here. I'm not sure here. I'm sharing the links on the chat, but I think at least for me, looks like the message that I send here on the chat is not being delivered for the destinations. Probably some bug inside our Wave video platform. Maybe suggest to implement some unit tests about it. Maybe helpful.
Maybe we could ask our audience to confirm if they are receiving the messages we are sending to the community.
If any of you can, a great idea, Manny. If anyone that's watching can actually feedback us with if you are getting the links of the books that I'm actually sending all the links here. We discussed it today on the chat. If you're seeing there, and if you can just type here, yes, I'm receiving, will be super helpful. My book for today, I shared it before, but I think it connects a lot with the topic. It's working effectively with legacy code. As we are talking about tests, it's a great book if you're working with some existing application or system that has legacy code that doesn't have the unit test or any kind of test. It does give you a lot of insights how to start implementing it. Because in reality, it's very difficult to get a greenfield project that you start from zero and you can, let's implement TDD. In most of cases, we just start in some application that already exists, and most of them, if they have some, most of them don't have tests implemented. So there are a lot of challenges that is not written on getting started tutorials that we see on that unit test tutorial. So that's a great book that gives you a very real use cases for this kind of problems. So I think today that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed, especially Tomoe, with the suggestions and answers here from our specialists. And keep following us. We have the channel on the YouTube, and there is all the playlists with all the contents here, and we'll be talking with you guys not the next Monday but the next one. We skip one week and keep our sessions. So see you guys. Thanks, Pedro. Thanks, Manny, for all the insights, and we'll keep talking. See ya. Bye.
See you, everyone. Bye.
Take
care.
Bye.
Can you hear me? I
Yep,
don't know
we can
why.
hear you. The screen is still showing starting in 0.
Yeah. uh,
Maybe if you refresh your browser, it might take you to the.
Let me see.